Welcome, 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 my friends. It's Alliteration Gaming again, and today we're going to be doing a bit of a different video. We're going to be doing some physical Vanguard content. Oh, spooky. I know I've done a lot of Zero in the past, but the physical card game is actually my primary passion when it comes to the IP, and today we're going to be talking about my primary passion in the physical card game right now, which is Chronofang Taiga. So this deck is specifically going to be post V-EB14, the next stage. It actually got quite a few new toys in there and makes the deck substantially better and also substantially different in a lot of ways. You're still just trying to like turn Rebellion sideways, but you can do it a lot more efficiently now, and I'm going to kind of show you how. So our starter is, of course, Chrono Tigar. I don't have the new one that gives you a quick shield, but you should have it ideally. He just, on ride, draw a card, standard Forerunner stuff, standard not Forerunner stuff, standard starter stuff. Anyway, he doesn't do anything special. If you play Dran in Chronofang, you have really bad taste. Play Tigar. So moving on to the grade 3s and the grade 4s, we're just going to kind of talk about them together because, well, they're basically two cards in one, and these two cards are the entire deck. So first, we're going to look at Chronofang Tiger. He has two skills. Well, first of all, he has Force. His first skill is Act. Discard one or more cards from your hand with some of their grades being 3 or greater. Search your deck for a grade 4, i.e. this guy. Ride it, and at the end of the turn, you retire it, and you then re-ride him from your soul as rest. So we're just going to kind of like go right into, well, I guess we should talk about his second skill as well. So his second skill is when he's run upon by Chrono Tiger Rebellion, this guy, you can discard a card from your hand, and your Vanguard, now Rebellion, gets +1 crit and +1 drive. So this is like really, really good, really, really potent. I mean, he's the only way you can get Rebellion, so it's not really, it's kind of redundant to talk about them in any like other kind of vacuum. So then we're just going to go right on to Rebellion. Rebellion does a lot of things in one skill. So when Rebellion attacks, you're going to activate all of his abilities according to how many cards in your hand. If you have 5 or less, you get to retire your opponent's front or rear guards. Well, 2 of them. If you have 3 or less, your 3 front row units get 10k. And if you have 1 or less, you turn your entire damage zone face down, and this unit gets all of your opponent's guardians get minus 5,000 shield until the end of turn. So let's talk about these two. These two work really, really well together, obviously, because when you Superior Ride Rebellion by Chronofang, you get to discard a card to give him a crit and a drive. So Rebellion becomes like an absolute beast, and the rest of the deck kind of just keeps making him bigger and bigger. And the end goal, essentially, is to get as many cards that can ditch our hand so we can get as close to these abilities as possible, and then replenish our hand afterwards. Chronofang is the most blatant example of that because you discard a card to get +1 drive. So you don't have the card in your hand for the attack, so you get your abilities off, and then you do have it in your hand after the attack because you need to survive next turn. This deck can honestly recur a lot of its hand really, really easily. Most of the time when you're swinging in with Rebellion, you're going to be activating the first 2 abilities. You're going to be using 5 or less and 3 or less. 1 or less is usually just when you're kind of going for the kill. But for the most part, you're just going to kind of use Rebellion as this huge giant 2 crit, usually 3 crit, because you do usually go Force 2 in this deck. Most of the time you're going Force 2 in this deck to just make Rebellion this giant like 25k 3 crit monster with triple drive or quad drive, depending on how many of these guys you pop off. And he's just going to be this huge beast that's powering up your front row while you're destroying your opponent's front row every turn, and that's kind of the main tempo of the deck, I suppose, is just these huge power plays. Because of these two, you're going to generate the re-ride, you're going to generate a couple Force 2s by turn 4, and you're just going to really, really, really be smacking them hard, and it's hard to deal with, honestly. Rebellion is just extremely hard to deal with. Because of just how potent he can be randomly, and if you're just kind of caught without a perfect guard, it can be really, really tough to deal with, especially if he's hitting you with the -5 on your shields. So these two are still kind of just as strong as ever together. Rebellion is the entire heart, soul, and backbone of this deck. It rides or dies by him, and rightfully so, because he's just an absolute beast, especially with a lot of people playing, a lot of decks now aren't playing actual Sentinels anymore. They're playing the 30k shield Sentinels, so you make those 25k, and it's just harder to guard Rebellion without a PG. So he's really, really strong. Even without the 1 or less skill, that's just kind of like a niche thing. Sometimes, though, you do go for it on your first Rebellion. Like when you're at low damage and you're not worried about dying next turn, you can go for the one or less in your first rebellion. That happens quite a lot, and it can really pressure your opponent if you have the cards in hand to make it happen. So that's more or less those two, and then the rest of the deck is kind of just going to be built around supporting this guy. So moving on to the grade 2s, we have 4 copies of Steam Skara Urcab. Urcab is a really good card. So Urcab has 2 skills. His first skill is act on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. You can counterblast 1 and discard a card from your hand to give your Vanguard +1 drive. And then his second skill is in hand. When he would be discarded, you can discard him as a grade 3. So if push comes to shove, you can use him as your Chronofang's fodder to grasp your rebellion. But for the most part, you want to be trying to keep these guys on the board so you can use that first ability to get +1 drive. Again, this is just kind of another instance of you drop a card from your hand so that you don't have it when Rebellion attacks, but then it comes in the form of a drive check, so you do have it after he attacks. So you get your abilities, but also get your hand back at the same time. Urcab is also kind of insane early game, being able to give your grade 2 Vanguard, even if it's him, if you have to ride him. Twin drive is pretty good. It can proc, like you usually just discard like your quick shield or something for it. Or if you discard an actual card, you can proc a lot of your discard effects, and it's really good. Urcab has to be at 4 in this deck. In Chronojet, because you have this guy's ability to stride with anything, it's arguable to not play 4 Urcabs, but in Chronofang, it's not up for debate at all. You have to have 4 of this guy. He's too important. He does basically everything you would want to do in a card. And then speaking of Chronojet, we are playing 4 copies of his best friend, Smoke Gear Dragon. So Smoke Gear Dragon has 2 abilities, but we can only use 1 of them. So his first ability is on Vanguard or Rearguard. When he attacks, he gets 5k. He just is a 15k attacker just all the time, anywhere, anytime, any place. And then if you wrote a grade 4 this turn, you can Soul Blast 1 and draw a card. So this is really insane. Being your Rebellion turn, he'll be a 25k solo attacker that also just Soul Blasts 1 and draws you a card. That is like an insane value. Like, we play him literally just for that ability, because the second ability we cannot use. Because if your Vanguard is Chronojet Dragon, when you discard a card from your hand, it may be discarded as a grade 3. So he turns anything into the discard fodder for Chronojet in the Chronojet deck. But we can't use that ability because we're playing Chronofang. But it's honestly okay. His first skill is still really strong and still warrants 4 copies of him in the deck. Is pretty self-explanatory. Once again, he can draw cards after your Rebellion attacks, which just makes him even better. But I mean, drawing cards in general is just always good. But that's just a little more reason why he works even better in here. And then to round out the grade 2s, we have 4 copies of Steam Mechanic Nabu. So Nabu is when they attack. When Nabu attacks, you can bind a card from your drop zone, and then your opponent cannot guard with grade 1 or graders for the battle. Then at the end of the battle, you shove them into the soul, and then you draw a card. So Nabu's really good. Once again, we get to play Nabu and decrease our hand, and then after Nabu attacks, we get to replenish that hand. So Nabu's just really good. It also gives us Soul, which lets us use more Smoke Gears, which is really nice. All around, just a good card. That's all of our grade 2s. I didn't really find any other grade 2s worth playing. The grade 2 Chronofang is pretty good, because it can discard a card to get +1 crit, but I ultimately just don't find that as worth it, really, as opposed to the ways you can generate advantage. There's just kind of better discard outlets that we do actually play, and you'll see later on. But it's just not really necessary. The start of ride phase, draw and discard is quite nice, but it's just not ultimately something that warrants it being in the deck over any of these 3 grade 2s. So this is our little powerhouse team of grade 2s here. And going on to the grade 1s, we have the best card of the deck. This is Chronotooth Tygar. So Chronotooth has 2 incredibly powerful skills. The first one being at the beginning of your ride phase, if it's in the Vanguard circle, you draw a card. That's just insane. You just ride it and then you get to draw a card. Like, it's ridiculously good. And then when this card is discarded from your hand during your turn, you can counterblast 1, draw a card, and call it as rest. This is just nuts. Like, it's just literally an unconditional +2 that we can proc every turn, whether it be by Chronofang discarding with the on ride to get a drive and a crit. You can proc it off Urcab, especially like early game. If you give you 2 damage, you can do this turn 2, and like it's really powerful. It's just insane. Like, it's literally just a free +2 for like absolutely no reason. and it is one of the best ways you have to recur card advantage, to gain card advantage early on, and also to generate it later in the game. So that's kind of our, even though we do want to be discarding a lot of our hand for Rebellion to be online, we also just want ways to draw cards in the first place, because like you need to draw cards, you die. Anyway, our next grade 1 is we have 4 copies, yes, 4 copies of this dude, Steam Breath Dragon. Steam Breath is the grade 1 triple rare grade 3 searcher that all clans now have with their conditional 5k. So the main ability is, when placed on Vanguard or Rearguard, check the top 5 cards of your deck for a grade 3, put it into your hand, shuffle your deck. If you put a card into your hand, discard a card from your hand. Now, you might be thinking, yes, we only play 4 grade 3s in this deck, so this doesn't happen very often. But we're not really we're only trying to get it to happen if we don't have Chronofang, because, spoiler alert, if you don't ride Chronofang, your deck doesn't do anything. Like, it's really, really, really bad. It's bad. Like, like I said, Chronofang and Chrono Rebellion, like that's these are your ride or die. Like, you ride Chronofang or you die. It's just not, there's not any other line of play for the deck. It's unfortunately a little linear in that aspect, but Rebellion's good, so it's okay. So Steam Breath is just kind of there to help us secure the Chronofang ride, and then between things like the Urcab and the Chrono Tooth, you have a lot of ways to dig for cards early game, so it is actually pretty easy to see the Chronofang. But Steam Breath just gives us that extra bit of insurance to see it. And then his other ability is, if you discard a card from your hand this turn, he gets 5,000. If you get his skill off when you play him, you automatically activate that, which is really, really, really nice. There's a lot of early game plays that you can do with that. He can make like 28 with Smoke Gear. Even if you fail his skill, you can use Urcab to discard, and then like maybe you discarded something, and then you have like Nabu online that turn 2 now, because there's a card in your drop zone. Like, there's a lot of really, really early game, like, just power plays you can make with Steam Breath to help push damage, which is really, really good in this deck, because if they're at like 2 damage, or I mean, if they're at 3 damage, the second they're at 3 damage, Rebellion's attack is lethal. But even at 2, it's like, I don't think I can take that, because if I check a crit, if my opponent checks a crit on his like quad drive, I just die. So like, pushing damage really, really early is very, very, very good in this deck. So Steam Breath kind of helps us do that too. He's just a good boy. Next, we're playing 2 copies of Quickie Worker. This used to kind of be the MVP of Gear Chronicle. Now he's just kind of like a necessary evil. His ability is, when placed from hand, put a card from your drop zone on the bottom of your deck. If you put a grade 3 or greater card, Soul Blast 2 and draw a card. So unfortunately, because of Smoke Gear now being in the deck, you will almost never use the Soul Blast 2 to draw a card, unless you just like don't have Smoke Gears and you really need cards in that exact second. But for the most part, you will not have the soul to use that Soul Blast 2 and draw a card, which is unfortunate. But if I could kick this out the deck completely, I totally would. But at the end of the day, sometimes you draw all your Rebellions, or you damage check them, or you drive check them, and you want to keep being able to use your Chronofang to search for them and not have to. Sometimes you can just manually ride Rebellion from hand. Like, that's the thing that happens sometimes, and it's kind of cool. But if you don't kill them that turn, it's kind of bad, because then your Rebellion cannot get a drive and a crit from the on ride. Smoke Gear does not Soul Blast to draw, because you didn't ride a grade 4 this turn. Like, again, just if you don't kill them that turn, it's kind of bad. So sometimes you need to put your Rebellions back, and it's really just there as a 2 of, essentially, to do that, to put your Rebellions back in the deck. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's kind of something you still have to play. If/when we get the new grade 1 promo that Gear Chronicle has in Japan right now, which is a grade 1 that's, when it's discarded, you can Soul Blast 1, call it, and then you can Soul Blast 1 when it's discarded, and you can call it, and then you can put a normal unit from your drop zone back to your deck. So that's going to completely replace Quickie when it comes out, because it does the same thing. It puts our Rebellions back in the deck, but also acts as like a second Chrono Tooth Tiger, because it can call itself after you discard it. But for the most part, for now, we just have to play these Quickie Workers, and it's just awfully decent. Next, to round out, actually not to round out, we have one more pro tech. But next we have 2 Bearing Rovers. Bearing Rover is essentially just Wedge Move Dragon, but he binds, or he discards instead of binds. On the Vanguard Circle, when its attack hits, discard a card and draw a card. This is nice sometimes if you don't ride the Chrono Tooth, you just get a nice discard and draw. It kind of helps you filter out a little more. But the main reason we play it is because when it would be discarded from hand, you can discard it as a grade 3. So this just kind of like, together, like I said, we don't really want to be discarding our Urcabs to search Rebellion very much. So this is just kind of a nice extra like discard fodders to turn our Chronofang skill on to get Rebellion. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's just kind of a necessary little thing that I feel like you have to play at least 2. And it helps consistency. You don't ever want to be like, oh, I don't have a grade 3 to discard, or oh, I have to discard like good cards to get to grade 3 and you know, get my rebellion. So I don't want to have to do that. So we got 2 Baron Rovers in there. And then our last grade 1 is this little pro tech right here. This is Steam Fighter Zabala, and his act is discard a card from your hand to retire an opponent's rear guard, not once per turn. So if you're ever just like really pumping the card advantage on and you have too much hand and you're like, I need to get rebellion online, but I want to just throw away cards, you can at least destroy your opponent's stuff in the process. This card is pretty sick. Rebellion does retire the front row, but he retires only the front row. So having this like back row snipe and just this spot removal is really nice, especially we can combo stuff with like Chrono Tooth, and just it's just really nice. Personally, I don't think it's necessary to play. Like you could play a 3rd Baron Rover, or if you're really scared of drawing all your rebellions, you could play a 3rd Quickie, like, or you could play like a 1 of grade 2, like you could play a 1 of the grade 2 Chronofang. You could play a couple of different things. It's really just a tech slot. It's only there because I feel like two of each of these is what I want to play. So I was like, well, I now have a 1 of slot because of this. So I'll just play this cool card. Sometimes it really comes in clutch. So I like to keep him in there. He's a fun card. And then for the triggers, we're playing 4 heal. We do not play Uluru. That is Chronofang's Chronojet's girl. We don't do that here. We play the OG. And then we're just playing a solid fat 12 crits, specifically 4 of the 30k Shield Sentinel. These are absolutely amazing in Chronofang. Playing draw triggers is honestly a little bit of a boon. I experimented a lot. At first, I started out with 10 crit 2 draw, but man, every time I drew or checked, honestly, anytime I drew or checked the draw trigger PGs, I was like, man, this could just be a fat 30k shield, and it would be so much more easier to guard with, and it would just be a lot more efficient. And so I just went to 12 crit, and I'm really not looking back. I think 10 crit 2 draw is perfectly acceptable though, but you definitely need at least 2 of these guys in here, in my opinion, because a lot of the times early game the draw triggers like can be good to help you find like your really good pieces to make an effective rebellion board, but sometimes the extra damage from checking an early crit is just so much better. So I'm playing the fat 12 crit. And that's basically the deck. It's a pretty straightforward deck, all things considered. You just ride Rebellion, get Force 2, and then you turn them sideways and, you know, kind of hope that the rest of your deck pulls its weight. But I think this is a really strong deck. Silver Dust Blaze is out now in English, so this deck kind of definitely drops down a little bit, but it can fight Messiah and Lacrosse fairly well. It does pretty good against Susanoo as well. Like even with a lot of the crazy stuff that's coming out in the next set or two, Rebellion is still a really powerful card, and I think is still a very strong contender in the standard meta game. So anyway, that's about it for this deck profile. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you agree with or disagree with. There's a couple little peculiar choices in this list specifically, but I think they really work for what I like to do with the deck. But I would love to hear your thoughts as well, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.